This is a 1997 Honda Accord 4-cylinder. Has a leaking valve cover gasket. How do I know? Because of this oil on the front? No. Pulling the spark plug wires, inspecting each one shows that there's oil on the spark plug wires. That's how I know. It's a very simple job. I'll show you exactly how to do it. 4 bolts hold it down, a couple other various accessory attachments. There's 4 spark plug wires, the PCV valve, and it comes right off. And we'll replace the gasket and the tube seals for the spark plugs, put it all back together. Okay, first the spark plug wires. Loosen all 4. They're in order, so as long as we keep them in order, we won't lose track of which one goes where. This plastic retainer should pop right off with a little bit of help from this crowbar. They break easily, so try not to break it. And now put the spark plugs aside. And I've already taken the PCV hose off. There's another hose attached to the top that has a clamp that can be released with a pair of pliers. Just slightly loosen the hose, try not to crack it. Okay. Now that pops out. The cable. Hold it back there somewhere. Now these 4 nuts. Keep track of where this goes. If you can't remember, take a picture of it. It's got a little clip that goes into these 2 notches. This requires a 10mm socket. Here's the clip, the first nut. Let's put them over there. There's a wire that's grounding the frame of the car to the valve cover gasket. Remove that. Just pull the wire aside, stick it up like that so you won't forget to put it back on. Okay. Use this small pry bar to ever so gently break it loose. That's all there is to it. Now it should come off. Oh. These rubber grommets. There we go. And these are the gaskets that we're going to replace. Okay. There was really no evidence of any significant leaking around the outside of the gasket. All of this looks pretty good. And even inside the timing belt area, it looks very dry. The only problem was oil going down into the spark plug tubes. And I took the gasket off. It seems actually relatively soft and still pliable. I think, in fact, it may even be somewhat new. Maybe it was just a little bit loose. So I'm going to reuse this, see how it goes, and just seal the spark plug tubes with some additional adhesive and retighten it and hope that does the job. Wiping off the entire surface. Make sure there's nothing that's going to prevent underneath, that will prevent a good seal. Don't want to get any dirt underneath the gasket. A lot of times when these gaskets are installed, people use a little bit of silicone or rubber sealant in these corners. So just make sure there's not any left in there. With a screwdriver or like something like this. Try not to drop chunks of rubber down into the engine. Okay, now the spark plug tubes. Pretty clean, but I'm going to give it a shot of brake clean. I'll wipe it down one more time just to make sure that I get as good a sealing surface as possible in terms of contact, especially these spark plug tubes. We're going to put a little bit of sealer. Okay, the next step is I'm just wadding up a little bit of this rag to wipe out the groove that holds the valve cover gasket. Wipe off the gasket. It's delicate. Try not to tear it. That'll be the end of it. Okay, wipe off these spark plug tube seals. They are tight fitting into the aluminum valve cover itself. So the problem with the leak is right here where this flat surface rests against the top of the head. So that's what we're going to seal. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to put a little bit of glue in the corners to hold this valve cover gasket in place during installation, since we'll be turning it upside down. And I'm putting a little bit in this midpoint too. Okay, so let's just put it in place. Let that glue seal up a little bit. This side is a little more off-centered than the other side, so it's easy to tell which is the proper direction. Let the glue set for a minute. I'm going to take the spark plugs out and clean those spark plug tubes with carburetor cleaner. A little more aggressive cleaner since it's all metal down in there. No concerns about damaging any rubber parts. Okay, now to take the spark plugs out, it's a 5/8 socket deep, and I'm using a little bit longer ratchets, and sometimes these are tight and need a little more leverage to break loose. This socket has a magnet in it. It makes it easier to get these out if there's our problem. That shows you how much oil is sitting in there. So obviously this is a problem that needs to be resolved. Let's get the rest of these out. Same problem in this spark plug. That one wasn't as bad. so just wipe the oil off of the spark plugs and wash each one with a little bit of carburetor cleaner. It's more aggressive solvent than the brake clean. There's no rubber part here. Okay, now wash the inside. Kind of hold the can upright to keep it flowing. Washing all that stuff down in the engine is going to cause a little smoke when it first starts up, but that'll clean itself out. Just look down each one before we put it back together. Make sure all the oil is out. If it's not, give it another cleaning with the carburetor cleaner. Now just reverse the spark plugs back in. Finger tight. Okay, all the spark plugs are finger tight. And this takes a little bit more beyond finger tight, not much. That's it. It's just a common sealer. It's called Maximum Oil Resistant RTV Silicone Gasket Maker. Put a little of this on each one of these. Stuff on the rubber seals. I cleaned them off first with a little bit of carburetor cleaner and also in these four corners. Spread it around, wipe the excess off. Okay, now first steps on all the bolts and nuts. One step I recommend before you tighten everything up is to inspect the gasket. I'm using a mirror all the way around. Just make sure that it's in place, because as you turn it upside down and set it in where it belongs, if the gasket were to pop out during the installation process, that would be a problem. So do everything you can to ensure that it's in the proper place before you tighten it up. And I just put these bolts on the four grommets, the bolt for the ground cable. Now I'll tighten everything up and that's it. When I clean the spark plugs out, I'll show that after I get everything tightened up. The spark plug wires are full of oil using brake clean because it doesn't hurt the plastic or rubber. I'm just going to clean these off before I put them back in. When you tighten the bolts, or I should say the nuts on top of the valve cover, be sure not to over tighten them. Just go slightly past finger tight, then a tiny bit more. The tiny bolts that would easily snap. You over tighten them, and that's it. Let these dry for a moment. Okay, the spark plug wires are all in place. They're in the order that they came out in. You can snap into place easily. These organizers clip right on. I already put this cable on. Make sure that you put the ground back, and this hose goes back, the breather hose. Clamp back where it goes. PCB valve, not a bad idea to replace that. I didn't in this case, but certainly it wouldn't hurt. They plug easily. And that should be it. We'll start it up and see all the smoke on initial startup, and then it should clear out and run nicely. Okay, fired up eventually. And final inspection to make sure it's not